Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here in Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. Housing is an important human issue. Shelter is important to life in general. When we look at higher life forms, the life forms that move beyond bacteria and things like that, that we start to see things happen that even one plant will position itself underneath a taller plant so that it gets the appropriate amount of food, rain, and sunshine. Not too much, not too little, the appropriate amount so that it can grow and thrive. When we look at other species and animals, that we start to see more of things like shelters where nests are built, dens are dug out, burrows, all types of animals build some sort of shelter or den for them to stay safe, dry, warm, all the of the above. Why aren't human beings any different from that? And when we start to look at human beings, we start to look at what is going to be dignified for a human being to actually live in. And here's where we start to run into actual trouble, is that one person's idea of the perfect home may not coincide with the other person's. And yet we all have to live cohesively within a society. So these are some of the issues that are going to be talked about by David Eby and ministers that he has invited into a press conference about housing. How do we find a method of discovering what is going to offer housing for people? Right now there's a problem with tents and encampments popping up all over BC because of a homeless problem. A homeless problem that was brought about, one, by financial difficulties, two, by mental health. And financial difficulties, that may sound a little easier to solve than mental health. When we start to look at mental health, there are people out there that, simply put, if you put them in more than, say, 100 square feet, they become overwhelmed. So finding them a detached single-family home may not solve their issues with housing. They still might wind up back on the street again because that home, even a, say, two-bedroom or say a one-bedroom apartment, may be too much for them to handle. So we got to figure out who is going to go into what type of shelter and figure out what it is that they really want and what it is that they truly need, so that we all have safety, we all have dignity, and we're all heard in our society. So why don't we listen to what David Eby comes up with his ministers around the idea of building homes and placing people in those homes so that the encampments start to disappear and people can be safe where it is they want to live.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace Lohr, and I'm the MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill. It's truly an honor to be here this morning with all of you. I would like to acknowledge that we're on the territory of the Lekwungen peoples of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And we are here to tell you about the next steps we are taking to increase housing supply for people in British Columbia and to address the housing crisis for those in need. It is now my pleasure to introduce Premier David Eby.
Thanks, Grace. It's great to be here in Victoria and Vic West. Specifically, we're on the territory of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And very pleased to be here with Minister Lohr, with Minister Kahlon, Minister of Housing, and special guests who will be introduced as we go along. Thank you all for joining us as we launch our plan to build more homes faster for British Columbians. Homes, in fact, like the ones behind me, the beautiful townhomes there, in vibrant, family-friendly neighborhoods like this one. BC, we know, is one of the most sought-after places in the world to live. We have a strong economy, we have strong public services, and natural beauty. It makes our province truly a special place, we know that. But finding a decent place where you can actually afford to live is a challenge for too many British Columbians. In fact, it has become a crisis. There are too many people, for example, in their 20s and 30s who are still living with their parents. And you can ask anyone who's scrolling through rental listings on Craigslist or who is going to open houses looking for a place they might be able to buy. It's tough out there. Even people making a good income are struggling to find a place to live. This crisis is touching people in every corner of our province. It's impacting the quality of life in our communities, and it's holding back our entire economy. Businesses are struggling to attract workers who can't afford to live in the communities where the jobs are. So we didn't get here overnight. For too long, we had a housing market that prioritized speculators and investors over people. It didn't work well for people. The speculators used the crisis to drive up the cost of housing by buying and flipping homes for a higher price. They drove families out of the neighborhoods that they love and want to call home. Previous provincial and federal governments failed to take action on this important issue and confront those powerful interests. Making things worse for decades, they failed to build affordable housing altogether. So as demand rose, badly needed housing supply did not increase. When we formed government, we started to turn things around. We cracked down on speculation by introducing the speculation and vacancy tax, which helped turn 20,000 vacant homes into rental homes for people across Metro Vancouver alone. It helped keep housing prices and rents lower than they would have been. We also capped rent increases. We banned illegal rent evictions to protect renters. And we started to build affordable housing in this province again, with tens of thousands of new homes now complete, under construction, or in development. We are on track to meet our target of 114,000 units over 10 years and go beyond that because we know that the need for housing doesn't stop in 10 years. We've made real progress, and while the statistics are clear that our province is building more housing than ever before, interest rates, global inflation, and a quickly growing population have brought even more challenges. Simply put, we need to build more homes for people faster. And that's why we've been taking strong action to tackle these challenges from the moment I became Premier. We removed unfair strata restrictions to turn empty units into rental homes. A new permitting strategy is in place to remove obstacles to construct new homes that people need. We're working with municipalities under a new law to set ambitious targets to deliver more housing. We're protecting renters from profiteers with a rental protection fund dedicated to preserving the affordable rental homes we have and can't afford to lose. And we're taking urgent action to get people off of the streets and into housing with the supports they need. Today, we're taking an important next step. I'm proud to be here with Minister Kahlon, with Minister Lohr, to release our Homes for People action plan. Our plan has 4 main pillars: First, we're going to open more homes faster. Single-family detached homes are out of reach for many middle-class people. And 1 or 2 bedroom condos often don't meet the needs of growing families. Family-friendly neighborhoods need more small-scale, multi-unit homes. It's what some call missing middle homes. They're the duplexes, the triplexes, and the townhomes. Ones that have room young families need for their kids and for their pets. And the opportunities many seniors are looking for to downsize in their own neighborhoods as well, and maybe even have their kids and grandkids living next door, like those homes right behind me. Our plan will create a lot more of these middle-class homes through provincial zoning rules, faster permitting, less red tape, and more incentives. And our plan will create more rental housing stock by making it easier and legal for people to rent out secondary and basement suites across the province. Second, we're going to deliver better, more affordable homes by building thousands of more social housing units and 4,000 more units of on-campus housing for students, and by partnering with Indigenous communities and the co-op housing sector. Third, we're going to be supporting those with the greatest housing needs. Support for low and moderate income renters has been introduced with the new $400 annual income-tested renters tax credit. More homes to support people experiencing homelessness, and support to close encampments and get people into safer, more secure housing. Finally, this plan will build a housing market that works for people and not for speculators. One of the major factors in high BC real estate prices is house flipping. That's when a person buys a property intending to sell it soon after for a profit. This drives up prices in that neighborhood, and it means that families looking for a place to live aren't competing with other families, they're competing with speculators to buy a home. That's why we'll crack down on this practice by introducing a tax on the proceeds of those sales. For those thinking about buying a house to flip it, think again. For those planning to flip a home they own, the tax is coming. This is your warning. We'll also get tougher on short-term rentals and bad faith evictions that are driving up rents. Short-term rentals, for example, are causing a loss of badly needed rental homes. A decent home is foundational to building a good life. It helps students so they can afford to get a good education and pursue their dreams. It helps young families grow and thrive in the neighborhoods they love. It helps seniors to live their lives in dignity. And it helps people who work here, who drive our economy and deliver the services we all rely on, so they can afford to live in these communities too. If the last few challenging years has taught us one thing, it's that going it alone doesn't work. There's nothing we can't overcome or achieve if we all work together. This plan is rooted in that fundamental vision. It's going to take all of us working together to deliver the homes people need faster. Co-ops and nonprofits, municipalities and home builders, and senior levels of government. Together, I'm more optimistic than ever that we'll build a safer, stronger, and more secure BC, one where everyone has a good place to call home and no one gets left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. I am so grateful to be part of a government that is taking serious and bold steps forward on tackling the housing crisis. With more to say on our Homes for People plan, I'm thrilled to introduce Minister Ravi Kahlon.
Great, thank you so much, Premier, and thank you so much to Grace. I too want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Kwan-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and when Premier Eby asked me to take on the job of Minister of Housing in BC, he gave me a clear and simple direction: deliver for people. It's those 3 words, deliver for people, that grounds our government. When it comes to housing and delivering for people, it's never been more important. For far too many British Columbians, a good place to call home is not within reach. House prices and rents are pricing people out of the communities they love and they grew up in, the places that they want to call home. The reasons for the housing crisis are many and complex, but it didn't help that for decades, lack of investment from the province, the federal government, towards housing. During that time, demand went up, but supply simply did not keep up. The Premier mentioned many of the core actions the government has taken to address this, and we've made some real progress. Today, at the halfway point of our 10-year target to deliver 114,000 homes, we are on track. We are already projected to deliver 108,000 homes open or under active construction by 2027, with tens of thousands of more homes coming through other avenues. But we are now facing increasing headwinds and new challenges that we cannot shy away from, and challenges that need strong action to close the gap between supply and surging demand. That's why today we are bringing forward our Homes for People action plan. This is an action plan to meet the important moment, to tackle housing challenges head on and deliver more homes for people faster. This action plan brings forward important steps to unlock homes that we need now, which gets us to the key part of the plan, creating more small-scale, multi-unit homes that work for people, and the type of homes that fit into our existing neighborhoods. Right now, outdated zoning laws in many communities mean mostly constructing high-rise condo towers or asking young families to purchase single-family homes as their first home. While these types of homes work for many, they still remain an important part of the fabric of our community. But the reality for many is that this type of housing doesn't meet their needs and is simply out of reach. This means too many of our neighborhoods are losing families, losing children, and losing that important feeling of community. Whenever I talk to people about housing, I hear the same things. Grandparents wanting their children and grandchildren nearby, and young people pleading for housing options that are within reach and not a distant dream. And business owners are asking me, where have all the workers moved to? People want choices, and more choices in the neighborhood that they grew up in. Homes closer to transit, closer to schools, and closest to where people work. That's why later this year, our government will introduce legislation that will allow up to 4 units on a traditional housing lot, with additional units in areas well served by transit. This will be province-wide policy. This means no more long zoning processes just to build a duplex, a triplex, or a row home. Without more of these types of homes, we risk pushing more of our next generation out of this province. We risk creating neighborhoods where playgrounds are quiet, sidewalks are empty, and coffee shops are empty. Small-scale multi-units homes is how we can address this. Over the coming months, we're going to be talking to local governments and other housing partners as we fine-tune the details of the legislation to ensure that it delivers the homes people need right away. To help deliver more homes for people quickly, we are also going to expand the supply of secondary suites by introducing legislation to allow them in every community in British Columbia. We will also be offering homeowners forgivable loans to build and rent secondary suites at below market rates in primary residence. This plan also takes important steps to help easier for people to find a home near transit. Building more homes near public transportation makes it more convenient for people to get to work and to school, while helping families reduce their vehicle dependency and costs. That's why, through this plan, we're delivering up to 10,000 homes at or near transit over the next 10 to 15 years by acquiring land near hubs and corridors and turning the land into thriving, living communities. And this action plan does not stop there. We must speed up local and provincial permitting to reduce costs and deliver more homes faster. And we do this with this plan, a commitment to become a North American leader in digital permitting. And instead of selling off public land to developers, this plan lays out how we will launch BC Builds, a new program focused on building middle-income homes with public lands. And through this plan, we will directly fund the construction of thousands of homes. These will be more homes for students at colleges and universities, for Indigenous peoples by doubling the amount of housing built on and off reserve, and renters, including families and seniors and people living with disabilities. We're going to be expanding our supports to British Columbians with the greatest housing needs, with new actions to prevent and address homelessness through our new homelessness framework, Belonging in BC, as well as a new income-tested renter's tax credit. Finally, we're going to continue to take action on building housing for a market where it works for people, not speculators. This means bringing in stricter enforcements for short-term rentals, implementing a tax to discourage short-term flipping, as well as addressing short-term speculation, and expanding the speculation and vacancy tax, including stepping up auditing efforts. I could go on with the actions in this plan to create the homes we need, but we have more speakers to get to today. So I encourage everyone to read the plan. And in closing, I would like to add that we can't wait for this work to start. As BC's Housing Minister, I've been more determined and more optimistic about the future of our province. We can and we will build the housing that people need. So thank you so much, and I'll welcome Grace back.
Thank you, Minister Callahan. We, as the Minister mentioned, have a few other speakers. I'd like to introduce Mayor Marianne Alto, Mayor of Victoria, and proponent of housing affordability, attainability, and strong communities.
Thank you. Okay, I guess I do need a stool, eh? Suddenly. Thank you very much for being here today in this incredibly exciting day. Thank you, ministers and Premier, for everything that you've said. You know, Minister Callahan said he could go on and he doesn't want to. I really wish he would. And that's because there is so much in this plan that is not just supportable and something certainly that the city is excited to be a part of, but something that is actually going to deliver possibly on the most critical piece that we have facing municipalities today, and that is a housing shortage. What's really exciting about this is that there's great words, and you've heard a number of them already, but they're actually backed up here by actions, and they're actions that are important because they are based on good public policy, and that is something that we see far too rarely. There's a lot I could comment about here today, but I'm just going to pick a few things that are particularly important to the city. Obviously, the first one has to be what we've dubbed missing middle. The city, as you well know, finally adopted its own missing middle strategies and policies just earlier this year in late January. And we're pleased to see what the province has put forward as the minimums or the expectations. Our expectations are actually a little bit higher, and so we do have some different numbers that actually challenge our own residents to be really, really bold and really provocative in what that they can create. And so we look at really trying to reimagine the entire city from the perspective of what the 1950s looked like in single-family dwellings, to be able to look at protecting some of the look of that in some of our older homes and bigger homes, but making sure that they have multiple units, and being able also to really support developments like the ones that you see behind us today, as they look new, and they are new and spectacular, but they reflect that multidisciplinary, multi-unit design that has been so popular in so many other parts of the world. The second piece for us that's super exciting are the supply targets. Yes, there's a lot of conversation here about affordability and supply and what we can do about both, but a lot of this is really focused on ensuring that we have enough supply, that we have choices in typology, and we can actually build homes that go from the very low income supporting homes to everything else through the housing continuum. And so those supply targets, very exciting for us. Helping municipalities simplify our processes are absolutely essential. We've done quite a lot of that work already in the City of Victoria, but any assistance we can get from the province to ease those provincial requirements are more than welcome. We want to be able to build different homes for different people across the city as fast as possible, and everything the municipalities can do with the province based on their public policy decisions is going to be super helpful. And finally, the amazing focus here that's on both home ownership and rentals. As you all know, more than 60% of Victorians rent, and so anything that we can do to begin to create more and more of those rental opportunities as quickly and easy as possible is just incredibly fast. As I said, lots of this we have underway in the city, at least in small pieces, but we cannot do anything like this alone, and so the opportunity for us to work with the province and to be able to be the pilots or the demonstrations of how this can work, because it really can work. We've already proven it in a number of different types of housing developments, and you see one of them behind us, and you'll see many more that are in process and will be coming along in the next year or so. But we cannot do that without the support of the province. We need, again, more policy and legislation that will enable us to do our work faster so that we can serve more of our residents. We need funding because we need to have rewards for achieving those targets so that more municipalities who maybe haven't quite understood why they can benefit their residents this way actually are enticed to do so and to be bold and take some risks. And finally, and perhaps as important as anything else, is helping to bring the federal government to the table. So much of the gaps that have been in place for decades because the feds have not been with us for a long, long time. And so the work that the province is doing with their federal partners are really, really important for us as well. So all of this really for me is about collaboration, obviously. It's about leadership. I love the title of this, Homes for People, because isn't that really the only reason all of us are standing here? We are really excited to be partners in this plan. We are really excited about what we can do to actually activate the plan. And we are absolutely proud to be standing here with the province to be able to see the leadership that allows municipalities to make good decisions that are supported by different governments so that we can all make these solutions real together. Thank you very much.
Next, we have the chance to hear from Luke Murray. Luke is a principal at Arise Development and also an advocate for diverse housing types for rich and strong communities.
Hi, very pleased to be here today. I started my career in housing as an urban planner and then became a developer and spent most of my career on what we now call missing middle housing. But when I started, we called it a career limiting move because it was very difficult to build that type of housing in very lengthy processes. Gordon Price coined a very interesting term called the grand bargain, whereby we densify our downtowns with very high dense towers, but the residential neighborhoods are largely left alone. And that's problematic because the type of housing we built directly correlates to the type of people that move into our neighborhoods. And so if we want families, we need to build family-friendly housing. Locally, we did some research with StatCan data that showed it takes around 21 units of tower-based housing to generate one new child, whereas ground-oriented housing takes around 1.67 units to generate one new child. And that framework is really across the capital region. So it really does show that the type of housing you invest in and build really reflects the type of people that move there. So this policy is very important for that. But beyond families, we work with a lot of nonprofits that would like to develop small-scale infill housing solutions, whether it's for vulnerable citizens or seniors that want to stay in their communities, but they just don't have the financial resources to go through uncertain rezoning processes that are very time-consuming and expensive. I think this policy is actually, that adds certainty, is actually going to enable a new type of real estate developer, and that is the homeowner developer, who might have some excess property and wants to develop a triplex in their backyard, but also can't go through a rezoning process. They might team up with a small builder to do this. And these people coming together off the sidelines are ultimately going to enable more housing. There's also, I think, an often overlooked part of this on the trade networks, in that big apartment buildings typically fall under Part 3 of the building code, and that requires specialized commercial trades. Whereas these smaller infill housing solutions fall under Part 9 of the building code, which a residential builder can now come off the sidelines as well to start building these types of housing. So this policy actually enables more capacity even in our subtrade network to build housing. But finally, the point I wanted to hit on was it's really refreshing to have a province really start to tune into the housing theory of everything. And that is that all of our societal outcomes, whether they are social, environmental, or economic, are really tied to people being housed. We cannot have a resilient, successful, vibrant province if people aren't in safe and secure housing. And the certainty that this program adds, I really hope will start to bring people together to make room in their communities, that will start to look, instead of neighborhood character being defined by a pitch of a roof or a spindle on a porch, that it's the characters themselves that make up the neighborhoods. We cannot have diverse communities if we don't have diverse housing types. So the housing choice provided by this policy is just instrumental in having a successful province. So I'm really pleased to be here today and supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Our last speaker is Bridget Ryan. Bridget is a Victoria resident.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity today to share my experience. So I've been living here in Victoria for well over 10 years. I started out as a PhD student up at UVic, and I've stuck around to work as a postdoc in the biology department at UVic. When I started grad school, my husband and I moved into what you would consider missing middle housing. So my home is a unit in an old heritage house that was converted into a fourplex. And it served myself and my husband really well during the years that I was a grad student and also during the years that we've been building our career. It's provided us with many of the perks that people often associate with single-family detached housing. So we have our own porch, a private entrance that opens directly to the outside. The property contains many mature trees, and it's given us space to tend a garden. It's also allowed us to connect with many caring neighbors and provided social benefit. So we've had neighbors who have been able to water our garden when we've been away, or to pick up groceries for us when we are housebound with COVID. So this type of housing is far more accessible to me than a single-family house. And given the benefits that I've experienced living in missing middle type housing, I'd really like to see changes that would allow more of the sort of housing that I've enjoyed to be built across cities like Victoria. And this matters a lot to me because housing is currently a source of considerable anxiety. I feel trapped by this market. We moved into our current home over 10 years ago, and the price that I'm paying in rent is far lower than what you would have to pay for a new unit elsewhere. If we have to move, the majority of my current postdoc salary will go just toward paying rent. And though the unit that we lived in served us really well for a number of years, it doesn't currently meet our needs. We would really like to start a family, and there are distressingly few options available in the city for family-suitable housing. I've been delaying having a child, and I fear that by the time I can get access to secure family-suitable housing, I'll have missed the opportunity to be a mom. And so for me, a stable two-bedroom unit in a houseplex would really go a long way to meeting my needs. And so I'm really hopeful that these changes that are being proposed can help to provide that for me. Thank you.
As a parent, as a neighbor, as a resident, as a member of this government, I'm incredibly grateful to the advocacy and the action of the people who have been speaking today and many others in community. It is life-changing to have access to diverse types of housing that fit your family's needs, and it truly makes community. That wraps up today's events, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I would invite reporters who have questions here on site to come behind the camera bank. It's better for sight lines for cameras here. Our first question on site goes to Richard Zussman, Global News.
Premier, you argue here that you are hitting your targets in terms of building based on your previous plan. Even so, we have record-breaking housing prices. It's the highest in North America. We have rents that are the highest in North America. We have vacancy rates that are in essence zero. Is that an acknowledgement that the previous housing plan was a failure and contributed to the continual challenges we have in the housing market in BC?
Well, I couldn't disagree more, Richard. What we're facing right now is a really remarkable challenge in British Columbia related to our success. We've attracted 100,000 people to British Columbia last year. In the first 2 quarters of this year, we're breaking last year's record, which itself was a 60-year high in population growth. We're growing gangbusters, and we need our housing supply to keep up with it. What you're seeing today is that we know that delivering on the housing that we've delivered on so far, we've delivered, the number is about 74,000 units, either complete, in development, under construction, or delivered through initiatives like the speculation and vacancy tax. We still need to do a lot more. And what you should see in this plan is that we are leaving no stone unturned when it comes to addressing housing. Whether it's working with municipalities to set targets, whether it's eliminating red tape so that housing can get built quickly, whether it's building with First Nations partners or looking at Airbnb and short-term rentals to bring those units back onto the market. We are taking a comprehensive approach to this challenge. We recognize that it's a crisis for people looking for a place to live.
talking about a crisis, the downtown east side continues to deteriorate. There are encampments that still line Hastings. At what point is the province going to move in and remove those encampments? And what next steps are there available for those looking for housing? And what are you going to do about those who are there who just want to fight with the province and have no interest in finding long-term housing?
So the Minister for Housing last week released our plan developed in partnership with the City of Vancouver, with nonprofit organizations and people with lived experience. And the answer is pretty straightforward and predictable. It's that we're going to provide housing, dignified emergency shelter to get people off of the street, and then from there into supportive housing, 110 units a month over the next 3 months. And we'll work closely with the city. The city's responsibility is around the on-the-ground operational piece related to the encampments. Our responsibility around making sure that the housing is available, and we're working in close partnership. The situation in the encampments is profoundly concerning. We're seeing fires, assaults. This is why we don't support encampments as a response to homelessness, and why we feel huge urgency to address this issue. That's just phase one of our work in the downtown east side. As we go forward, after working with the city to address the encampments, getting people inside to safer, more appropriate housing, we need to work on ensuring that this is a sustainable low-income neighborhood that contributes to the broader fabric of the city of Vancouver, rather than being a magnet for people who are very vulnerable, who then get trapped in violence, exploitation, and other challenges. We can get there. Other communities have gotten there, and we will work with our partners to deliver that. And I'm really excited where we need to go, but right now we're focused on the urgent situation of the encampments with the City of Vancouver.
Our next question comes from Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
Hi, Premier. How do you respond to potential complaints from municipalities who will say that rezoning in a blanket way will take away land use from their policies?
What this plan is addressing is what we see as a crisis for the future of our province and the future of cities. If you don't have workers who can work in the coffee shop, if you don't have teachers who can work in the school, if you don't have nurses in the hospital, if you don't have employees for your major employers, because people cannot afford to live in the places where the jobs are, your city's future is very much in question. So what we're doing is partnering with municipalities, supporting them in hitting, frankly, aggressive housing targets to build the housing for the people who are choosing to come to British Columbia, because housing's like any kind of other essential infrastructure. We need it to make our cities go and work and thrive, and we can only deliver that in partnership together. We know that. And so you've seen us do things like the $1 billion investment in infrastructure with cities, the new legislation around housing targets, today's announcement. That work will continue. All of it is about what I hope we have as a shared goal, which is thriving communities for people, and that British Columbians have a chance to find affordable housing.
Do you expect any sort of legal challenge in that regard from the municipalities? And also, how do you respond to municipalities like Langford, which recently brought in more of an anti-development council and who are putting the brakes on development?
You know, I think the discussion about how this is implemented and how this is all going to work will be, it has been a dialogue for a long time, and it will be for a long time going forward. But what this plan really takes off the table is whether or not we're going to take action. We are going to take action. We expect municipalities to be key partners in that. At the provincial level, we're going to set these minimum standards, which is that the process for building the housing that we need needs to be the same as building a single-family house. It needs to be just as easy to build affordable, attainable, middle-income housing as it is to build the most expensive housing. And that core idea is, I think, quite straightforward. It responds to the crisis. You heard Bridget talk about her experience. And there are too many people in that situation right now that cannot find housing. And so if we have disagreements, I guess it'll be with people who just don't see that need because they're not sympathetic to it, but I don't know how they don't see it. This is an urgent situation for British Columbians, and we'll take the action that's necessary to deliver for them.
Next question, Rob Shaw, Check News.
Premier, the plan's kind of vague in terms of how a lot of this is going to work. So I'd invite you to comment on that. And then also maybe you can explain more. What are you doing for this fourplex rezoning thing? Is that a law that's going to override municipalities? Someone mentioned policy. how does that work? Does it just remove it from municipalities? What are the terms of this new forgivable loan program that people might get excited about when they read today, but don't appear to be any actual details on it? Can you both respond to both of those things?
Sure, absolutely. In order for all of these initiatives to work, they all require partnerships. So for the rezoning, which will be a provincial law, it will establish base standards across the province. It will be a requirement, a province-wide standard. To make sure that it works as intended, we're going to need to engage with municipalities. We're going to need to talk to them about what provisions do we need to have in place so that this works. Not whether or not we do it, how is it going to work? It's the same with the loan for people to open up a secondary suite in their home. Who our partners will be, credit unions and banks, will government deliver it directly? What will work best for people in terms of the actual programming? So there's work to do. This is a plan that sets out our direction, where we're going, so that we can take this plan and work with our partners in delivering on it. I think it's really important to ensure that we are working together. It's a core piece of my remarks, is that provincial government can't do this alone. We need partners to deliver these programs, to build the homes. They need to work for British Columbians, and they need to work for communities. So the policy work is already underway. With the launch of this plan, we can talk about it in a much more open way with British Columbians directly, get their feedback, make sure it works, but not a huge, lengthy engagement consultation process with an aim for delivering. We're talking about legislation in the fall on many of these initiatives and implementation going forward. It's a very exciting time. I am excited about this next stage of our housing plan and delivering that middle-income housing for British Columbians.
I guess one of the questions that comes up when you give a forgivable loan to someone who already owns a house is whether the government is helping that person increase their property value by building a secondary suite. They can sell the home one day for more money thanks to provincial taxpayers. Can you sort of respond to that as well, that this idea that we're subsidizing the homeowner and not the renter in order to create the rental space?
I think the key takeaway, I hope, from this plan is that we are going after absolutely every opportunity we can find around housing. And specifically related to this situation, and it's one that I definitely see in my own community that I represent, is I talk to seniors who are very house rich. Their home is worth millions of dollars. They are very income poor. They do not have income coming in, and they're looking for ways to increase their monthly income, but they want to stay in their community. So with the rezoning piece, they will be allowed to do that. If they have the resources to be able to do that, that's great. But there are lots of people that are struggling with mortgage costs right now, and they bought a place, and they're wondering about affordability, and they have the ability to bring on a secondary suite that would solve a lot of their financial problems, but they don't have the capital to open that rental suite. We need the rental housing. We'd love to support families struggling with affordability. We're going to check it out and see if this is a good opportunity through this program. And I think it is, but it's just one piece of a much larger array of initiatives to support affordability for British Columbians across the province.
Next question, Victor Sechin, CTV.
Hi, Premier. I just wanted to ask you with regards to the transit hubs and the plans for housing around there, how quickly do you anticipate that some of those homes could be open? And for people who may have single-family homes in transit corridors, how worried should they be that the province may be trying to acquire their homes?
So this plan is around transit hubs is based on a pretty straightforward idea. What has happened in the past is government has only bought the footprint of the transit station and no other property. And all the properties that are around the transit station go up in value dramatically, so that when they're finally built into housing, they're bought by people who don't actually use transit. And so by buying a bigger footprint for the station, and we can build housing around the station in partnership with the private sector, with nonprofits, for people who actually use transit that's actually affordable for them. It's an idea that's used in many other jurisdictions, and one that makes a lot of sense here. Anyone that owns a single-family home, or they like single-family homes, whatever, this plan is not a threat to them. This is about ensuring that communities remain livable. It's around ensuring that when they go to a coffee shop or someone who actually lives in their neighborhood, that can afford to live in their neighborhood, that's working at the coffee shop. When their kids go to school, that there are teachers and EAs at the school, that the cleaning staff at the school can actually live in the community where the school is located. If they get sick and they go to hospital, that there's actually nurses at the hospital that can afford to live close to the hospital. So these are basic things that make the community go. And that includes that when we build transit, when we invest billions of dollars in transit to support people, that there are actually people who use transit who live close to those transit stations.
I have a question from a colleague. Do you support the City of Vancouver's plan for a sweeping and comprehensive de-encampment of the downtown east side with police enforcement?
We're working in close partnership with the City of Vancouver, along with service providers and people in the neighborhood, around the profound challenge and, frankly, the deteriorating conditions in the encampments along Hastings Street. It's a profound concern to us, the fires, the assaults, the safety of people in the encampments. My message is to people who are living in the encampments: we have space in shelters right now. They're much safer than the encampments. Encourage people to go inside. And we're working with the City of Vancouver to ensure that there is dignified emergency shelter available for people who are moving out of the encampment, and also, going forward, supportive housing and otherwise affordable housing for people out of the emergency shelters. We have 110 units a month coming online to respond to this crisis in the neighborhood. But one thing that we all know is that it can't go forward the way it is right now. Between the fires, the challenge for, we had a fire over the weekend where the fire department had trouble getting to it in an SRO because of the structures blocking access. We know that something has to change, and that's why we're working closely with the city on that as an emergency response, and long-term, a sustainable vision that we're going to implement together to address the issues of the downtown east side.
Next question, Les Lane, Times columnist.
Well, thank you. Premier, the Minister Callan said a few minutes ago, we can't wait for this work to get started. But the legislation for the 4 homes on one single family lot is coming in the fall, 9 months away. I think the legislation for the wide open secondary suites across BC is in the fall. And you didn't mention when the flipping tax is coming. I presume that's the fall as well. Months after that to proclaim it, why do people have to wait until probably early 2025 at best for some of this stuff, given the magnitude of what you often acknowledge as a crisis?
Yeah, Les, when you look at the plan, it's very clear that there are initiatives that have been complete, there are initiatives that are currently underway, and there are initiatives that are planned. This work started when we formed government in 2017, when we set that target of 114,000 units, and we committed ourselves to be involved in housing in a way that the provincial government had not been for 16 years. This is a dramatic shift, and then also to be directly involved in delivering middle-income housing. And so that work started then. You can see, and we're providing an update on where we're at with those. We're also saying, where are we going? What are the other steps? Obviously, more needs to be done. People are still struggling to find housing. We've seen dramatic population growth. How will the government respond to this? The challenge has shifted over time, so is our policy to bring on the level of housing that we need for people who work and help run our communities. So I'm very excited about this, but I don't think you should read the plan as starting 9 months from now, because it started the day we formed government, and that work's going to continue as we work to deliver for British Columbians.
Now, flipping, I don't know, it's been decades. It feels like 10 or 15 years people have been worried about flipping and the obvious unfair pressure it puts on the market. It seems like a long time to wait for a flipping tax, and when it comes, will it be province-wide or will it be regional like the parts of the spec tax are?
So we're gonna do the work, the policy work in relation to the flipping tax to make sure that it has the intended impact and it doesn't have unintended impacts on British Columbians. But our intention is absolutely that it addresses this behavior that people are rightly concerned about, which is those driving up the cost of homes for families bidding against speculators instead of people looking for a place to live. And so it's critically important work, and less of your core message is more faster. I couldn't agree more. That's a core tenet of the plan. I feel that urgency as well. I know British Columbians do as well. And we're getting on it.
Next question from Wolf Defner, Black Press.
Yeah, thank you for taking my questions. And actually back on the subject of the speculation and vacancy tax, you said today that this tax is going to be expanded to additional areas. Can you say to which specific areas? Right now, Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, parts of the Okanagan, parts of Vancouver Island, parts of the Fraser Valley. Can the rest of the province expect to be paying or be burdened with that tax down the line as well?
So the core of the tax is that you pay it if you're holding a home vacant in a place where there is significant need for housing. And that's been the policy that has informed the location of the speculation vacancy tax, and the success is remarkable. More than 20,000 previously vacant homes that are now occupied by renters in my own community. We've got groups of students that are renting out previously vacant mansions. This is good news for them. It's better news for the community that the house isn't just sitting there vacant, and it's working. So that policy work will continue to identify other areas where there are vacant homes, there's an issue of vacant homes, but there's significant demand for housing in the community. But it's one part of an integrated strategy.
Yes, regarding back to the flipping tax, what, if any, details can you share about it in terms of numbers? Obviously, people are going to be reading that. People are going to be reading about the expansion of the speculation tax, this addition of this new tax, and people get sort of upset about having to pay more tax. So, what, if any, additional details can you share about that flipping tax in terms of value, in terms of magnitude, and so on?
Engaging in that activity. Homes are for British Columbians to live in this province.
We have time for one more question here on site before we take a couple of questions from the phone. Mary Brooke, Island Social Trends, please go ahead.
Hi. A lot of what you've announced today sounds like it will be applied province-wide. And in the last couple of months, you've mentioned there would be 8 to 10 targeted municipalities that might be, fingered for developing things faster. You haven't mentioned those today. So I'm just wondering if that's shifted now to taking the pressure off particular municipalities and going a little broader. And in areas like Greater Victoria, where there's a regional growth strategy by the CRD, would anything you're doing override what they've tried to put in place?
Yeah, one of the pieces that's most remarkable about the housing crisis is how it's not specific to South Vancouver Island or to Metro Vancouver, that it is in fact province-wide, and it's something that provinces across Canada and places across North America are grappling with. I read an article today out of the city of Denver grappling with these kinds of issues, and it's been all down the west coast of the United States. And so what this plan is about identifying some of those most promising strategies to be able to address this, to take our work to the next level that we've already been engaged in. And when I visit Prince George, when I visit Prince Rupert, when I visit smaller northern communities, Indigenous communities, the housing issue is front and center. It seems a little bit different, and it can originate in slightly different issues in these places, but the core issue remains the same. So yes, these strategies are province-wide strategies to respond to a province-wide problem. In terms of the very specific issue of the legislation that we passed related to housing targets for municipalities, the policy work is continuing with municipalities to identify cities and support them in identifying housing targets, support them in delivering and achieving those targets, and ensuring that there's funding in place when they do to recognize that work so that they can build the kinds of communities we want.
And regarding the $400 tax credit for renters, income tested, anyone who's on the RAP or shelter programs, will they be eligible to get the full 400, or will it already, because they're already getting support for renting, will they maybe not be?
So specifics about individual government programs and eligibility related to BC Housing residents or others will be announced in the full release of the plan. But the intent is that renters receive $400 of an annual tax credit, refundable tax credit, that is income-based, and the broad parameters were released in the budget.
Now we'll go to the phone lines for a couple of questions. First of all, Mira Bain, CBC, please. We'll go to the phone lines for a couple of questions. First of all, Mira Bain, CBC, please go ahead.
Thank you. This question is again about the flipping tax. How exactly will it work, and does it still not apply to builders? And how will it compare and work with the federal flipping tax?
Well, the work that we're doing right now is critically important to be able to, and part of announcing it in the plan so that we can speak with British Columbians about it, is to ensure there aren't unintended consequences. So, for example, a home builder that is selling units that would be impacted by this, we don't want that. We want those home builders to be building units, bringing housing on. That's a core part of our plan here. So the design of the tax has to be careful and prudent to target only those activities that we're going after, which is people buying a property for the purpose of just selling it a few months later at a higher price. So we're going to do that work and ensure that it works at the and delivers the result on the intended targets, and doesn't, to the extent that we're able to ensure it, doesn't have any unintended consequences on the activities we do want to see, on people building homes, on people opening a secondary suite in their home, someone dividing their home and creating a unit for family members to live in. And so that is an important piece of work that we want to have happen, and we don't want it to be captured by the tax. So that's why it will take some time to deliver the legislation on that.
Follow-up, Mira?
Yes, and another question on upzoning for multi-units on, let's say, single-family lots. Let's say for a city like Vancouver, for example, especially your riding, how would you deal with a backlash? Let's say the municipality doesn't want to do what the province is wants to introduce in this legislation. Is there an opportunity for a city to make their own decisions in that regard?
Absolutely, there's lots of space for municipalities to be involved in this process. What we're going to be setting out is a baseline standard for a permitting approval process that is quick, that is easy, that is understandable for people that want to build more than one unit on a single family lot. I can tell you in my own community, there's lots of these properties. There are homes that are divided into multiple units. There are people who have built carriage houses in the backyard. The problem is they had to go through a 2 or 3 year permitting process, whereas if they wanted to just tear down the home and replace it with another single family home, they could have done it in months instead. It cannot be that it takes years longer to build more affordable, more attainable housing, and you can build the most expensive kind of housing with the minimum amount of process. So that's what we're really going after, is to level the playing field for affordable and attainable housing here. And we think and we hope that municipalities will be supportive of that. You saw the mayor of the Minister of Victoria, the mayor of Victoria, speaking in support of this initiative and saying that in fact her city is going to go beyond those minimum standards. And I say great, but we are going to set out those minimum standards for the province.
We have time for one more question today. We'll go to Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail. Justine, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I don't know whether this is for the Premier or for perhaps Mayor Alto, but who is responsible now for, under this vision, for upgrading infrastructure like sewer or hydro lines to adapt communities to greater density?
I'll take a swing at it and then I'll pass it over to Her Worship to address. So one of the things that we're seeing is that homes that used to have 6 people in them, 8 people in them, now have 2 people in them, 1 person in them. And so there is a significant amount of capacity in infrastructure as neighborhoods empty out, frankly. And so getting back to those lively neighborhoods as they used to be, with the kids in the schools and with the pipes in the ground and everything humming along is where we're going to. There is capacity in infrastructure, but we do recognize the province is growing very quickly. We put $1 billion, an unprecedented investment in municipalities across the province, recognizing they're seeing huge growth pressures. We're working with the federal government to deliver infrastructure dollars for communities that are particularly struggling. I was in Rupert just a week and a half ago, around upgrading their pipe system. My colleague was down the road in Terrace announcing support for a landfill project there that they have. So we're going to continue to support cities with infrastructure. It's an important part. We understand we have a partnership role to play there, whether it's roads or sewers or parks or trails. We're going to keep doing that. And I'll pass it over to Mayor Alto. I'm sure she gets that question a lot as well.
In addition to what the Premier said, with which I agree, I think the piece behind the question, as I understand it, really relies back on whether the municipalities are going to embrace the reality of welcoming new people and new residents. We have a very difficult decision always when we deal with land use and the infrastructure needed to support it, by trying to find that balance point between what's important for us to ensure that our current residents have the lives they expect, but that we're planning for the future as well. And so yes, the infrastructure demands will increase as the number of residents will increase. We're prepared for that. It's part of our decision making. We will absolutely rely on the partnerships that we have, in which we expect to continue and enrich with the province and with the federal government. And so it's a complicated question, it's got a complicated answer, but it's something that we're well aware of. It's true, as the Premier mentioned, that some of our neighborhoods do have fewer people than they had in the past, and that's one of the reasons that we're approaching this type of densification. But as we do that, we will not just match what is needed now, but we will be able to plan for the future. We have significant reserves, as many of you know, which are intended to prepare for just this instance. We're hoping that we have enough. Maybe we never have enough, but it's absolutely on our decision-making matrix, and we understand that it's not just important for us to create the units, it's important for us to create the infrastructure. And not just the infrastructure that supports those units, but the public infrastructure that supports the people who live in them. As more and more of us become comfortable living in smaller and smaller private spaces, we have to invest in our social spaces so that those public spaces allow for the continuation of the development and richness of our communities. That's part of the question too, and it's absolutely part of our planning and service delivery.
Justine, do you have a follow-up?
I do, and I just want to switch topics a little bit. Last week, Minister Callon announced some new supportive housing units in the downtown east side. I'm just wondering, how do you move people out of encampments when there are so many, I'm told, who don't see the SROs as the dignified option that you were talking about?
Well, there's a process, actually. So the shift has been, we don't move people directly from encampments. Now, there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, we don't move people directly from encampments into a permanent housing situation. We move them from encampments into dignified shelter, and that provides the opportunity to get to know the individual. What are their needs? What kind of housing will they do best in? Is this someone who can live in a zero supports kind of environment with a rent supplement? Is this someone who needs the most intensive supports we offer through complex care housing? It's a necessary interim step. And I recognize that for some people, it may not feel ideal to go into an emergency shelter situation, even if it is one where there is privacy and supports and meals. That may not feel ideal coming from, you've got your own tent. But one thing that we know is that the downtown east side encampments and encampments generally are not sustainable. People are not safer in these environments. We have seen fires. We have seen assaults. A survey of women in the downtown east side encampments showed that of 50 women had been assaulted in the encampments, 100%. This is not an acceptable situation. And so, yes, there's some give and take on everybody's part to make sure that we're finding the good solutions that work for people. And part of that means often going into an emergency shelter and from there into permanent housing. We also know long-term, we need to get rid of the SROs. There's a wide variety of SROs, though. There are some that have their own washrooms in the units, for example. There are some that have been fully renovated. There are some that haven't been renovated in 50 years. They have knob and tube wiring, and they have washrooms that are completely unacceptable, and they're unlivable in the summer. And so going after the most desperate condition SROs and making sure that they're up to speed, and ultimately phasing that type of housing out where there are shared bathrooms and kitchens so that people have their own units is where we know we have to go. But that is longer term planning for sure.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes today's event.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so we heard David Eby actually say that maybe like massive building of and buildings and developments may not be the answer that we're actually looking for to solve the homeless problem. That SROs aren't going to be the sole answer. That we need to find a mixture, and the right mixture, to truly help people. And it sounds like he may be on a good start, but the thing is there are other factors involved in this, because we have a whole real estate and building and construction development industry. We have people who are looking for government to maintain a certain level of infrastructure, and they're looking for government to act quickly as possible. The actions that we're talking about may take time, and is the public in general going to be willing to wait for that time to happen? Are people going to be patient enough for the process to work? We're all going to have to need to trust to see where that process is leading us, and see if that process is going to be appropriate for our community. Thank you for listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I have been your host, Michael Clogs, and I ask you at this time to click on that subscribe button wherever you may see it, and get more updates on human rights, government policy, global policy, as we get them. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.